as much as you allow to be possible.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, it's what you are willing to know. It's what you are willing to store in that subconscious mind as data.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, you know, like if you're hesitant, if you're not sure of the thing, like you're not sure of the knowledge that you're going to be, let's say, a millionaire.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's not going to be stored in your subconscious. If you're waking up every day with the assuredness, especially in that little window as soon as you wake up, before you're totally conscious, you're waking up and you're going, I'm a millionaire. It's so nice to be a millionaire. I feel amazing. It feels so good to be a millionaire. That's going to be stored in there eventually. Subconscious is going to be like, all right, so this is a fact.
Yeah.
That we need to take it down. I need headquarters to take down the fact that this woman is a millionaire, and I need the conscious mind to start working towards getting that $1 million because I can't live in dissonance.
And now for something completely different. I have another repeat guest today, which is so exciting, especially this one because, man, out of all the content that I've digested in the realm of understanding the history of religion, I've just never come across someone who speaks so eloquently about it and appears to be, not only knowledgeable about it, but like she likes it, she loves it, and I think that that's something that's an important component of, living a happy life, which I'm sure she would agree. But as far as titles go, she's a writer, she's an actress, she's a Ph.D. student, she's a content creator. I think she's a tarot card reader. I think she's even a cat. Um, and if you're someone who's digested her content before, I'm sure you've heard her say that. We talked last week for a little bit, and I was like, "Are you really a cat?" And you're like, "Just go with it," but anyhow, Elianne. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Twitchy Witch.
Yes.
Thank you so much for hanging out today.
Thanks for having me.
Hell yeah. Just kind of getting going today.
Yes, I should have added to the bio, not a morning person, big night owl.
Big night owl. Well, you know what? Let's go there. What do you do at night? What's your night owl routine?
Watching obscure documentaries and writing manifestos.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
So I'd like to start with, when we talked last week, you were talking about how pretty soon you're going to be Dr. Twitchy Witch. And so that's pretty cool. So can you tell us a little bit about what it is you've been studying and what that is about?
Yeah. I have been studying for my PhD for the last 6 years, 5.5 years. So this is like the 6th year. And I am writing about Palestinian political identity and how it's expressed in youth cultures, specifically through hip hop. Because music is just such a big political cultural component in the Middle East. So I wanted to look at this particular music phenomenon in Palestine.
Okay. Cool. We may have a little bit of breaking up here and there. I think we talked about that before, but if so, we'll make it work. Sometimes there's a lag, but it seems in post it always cleans it up. So in the studying, like, is there anything in the schooling that you've been doing that's around the history of religion and stuff like that, or is that more all self-taught stuff?
Well, it's a little bit of both. So for for my master's, I had written about alchemy and Jungian dream analysis, alchemical poetry, occultism, and its role in the greater modernist trend. So like early 20th century literature, American literature especially. And in that study, I ended up reading a lot of religious scripture because I was learning about archetypes and dream analysis. And I already had an interest in all these things. I did grow up watching different religious spiritual leaders debate with each other and had them as mentors. So I was always interested because, from a very young age, I felt like everybody seems to believe in God, but at the same time, they all think that their God is different than everyone else's. But to me, as a kid, it felt like, oh, there's just this one ominous power that everybody seems to be fighting over the categorization of, in a sense,
Mm-hmm.
the characteristics, the description, the stories.
Mm-hmm.
So I just grew up being interested in the stories. And when I started my master's, I ended up reading a lot more, especially in the Bible, Old Testament, New Testament stuff, because as it pertains to a Western unconscious. And then when I started my PhD and getting deeper into the Middle Eastern history and the Levantine world and the Arab world, I that took me to the Quran,
Mm-hmm.
and I ended up reading the Quran and then reading it sort of in comparison and it relatively in parallel to the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, so that's
Yeah, it's a good
big.
summary. I love it because you kind of you tip the hat towards where it all came from, and that's something else I'd love to talk to you about. So, um, it sounds like at a young age you had that looking around like, all right, something. That's the same thing for me. Like nothing against anybody who has whatever they have that they believe in wholeheartedly or whatever, or their
Mhm.
subconscious mind really, really believes in. For me, I'm just looking around and I'm like, all right, well, you guys don't seem to know what's going on though. You know what I mean? Like, you don't seem any different than any other, person on the street. Like, I don't see what the big deal is. That was kind of my disconnect. And I was very resistant to anything spiritual until I was like 36, 37. I was like, and I started documenting on the internet at that point, and I was like, all right, well, maybe there's something spiritual here. We'll get to that down the road. But now I'm in the space where I'm actually starting to kind of feel that, not kind of like I'm feeling it, for the
Mm,
recent year, but it's been super gradual for me. So
mm.
I'm curious for you, the spiritual side of things, because there's so many things that we could talk about. But one of the things I really wanted to talk to you about was the spiritual side of things in terms of like whether it's tuning into the present moment or however it is for you. When did your spiritual kind of start?
Yeah. Um, Very early, I um I suffered a lot of, well, I don't want to say suffered given the context of the world right now, but it
Sure.
was its own kind of, I guess, relative suffering.
Mm-hmm.
Just a series of psychotic breaks while I was growing up that started when I was about 6 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I had a dream. This was the same year I found out about Israel and Palestine, funny enough.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was around 6 to 7 years old, I had this dream of a very painful light that I was pursuing. And when I woke up from the dream, which felt so real, um, I was convinced that I was dead and that everyone was dead. And so I, started telling my father and the priest at school and the sheikhs, like, yo, do you know we're dead? Like, is that part of your book? Is it part of your practice that we're dead? And every time I would kind of go to someone older or someone who I trusted to tell them that, they would give me a different piece of advice, a different explanation. And, eventually I kind of forgot, if you will. And then after that, I would just consistently have these breaks. And ever since I can remember, even before that, my mother has always been just a natural dream reader, dream interpreter. She interprets dreams in a more along an indigenous practice, like an indigenous Levantine practice, rather than like a Jungian practice that I ended up taking. So growing up, it wasn't a question, yani. I never wondered if dreams were part of life or if they were important. They were. They just were. Like this is just the unexplained aspect. This is, where the spirits speak to us is kind of how I had understood it.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay. Hell yeah. Now I want to go into dreams a little bit. So since you have that history of having your mom be in that world, and then you studied Union. Is it Union? I know it's Carl Jung, right? But Union,
Jungian, yeah.
Jungian dream analysis. So the I've always kind of had this loose feeling like dream world, lucid dream, aliens, spirits, ghosts, whatever. It's all fucking connected somehow. And perhaps quantum physics kind of shows, yeah, see, you guys don't really know, but it is all connected. And so it's like arcade. But I always just kind of left them alone. But I have had many very lucid flying dreams where I'm physically able to fly. And it's like it's a story that's developing in the dream world, to where in the beginning it was my own internal recollection of it being in the dream, like, holy shit, I'm flying, and I would go explore and do all this stuff. But like the most recent one I had, and they pop up like maybe once every 2, 3, 4 months. I don't know, sometimes there's two in a row, but they're sporadic. But the most recent one I remember getting into, I was like, fuck, I'm doing it right now. And then I went to someone who was like, hey man, fucking, I can fly, and they're like, nah, man, bullshit. And I was doing it, and they're like, how are you doing that? I'm like, I don't know, man, but I'm fucking flying, and it was just super, super fucking vivid. And I'm just curious, what's your take on what it means when you fly in your dreams?
Well, it always depends on the greater context of the dream, what's happening, how you felt, how you feel about what it means. If we were taking a Jungian approach, generally Jung thought that dreams that where we were flying had to do with ego and self-esteem, and a feeling like we need to be higher off the ground than we are, or being off the ground, or being ungrounded. But it really depends on the details and how you felt. Like if this were a dream interpretation, I would ask some more questions. Who were the people there? How did you feel? What were you doing before you were flying? All of that.
Okay.
Where were you?
Okay. All right. Well, I don't want to hang out here too long because we can go down so many roads. But I will say there was another dream that I had recently that there was a dream in a dream, right? Like I went to sleep in the dream, and then in that transitional phase, I was with what I can only describe as a form of divine feminine. And the message was like, I'm always with you, or you're getting closer to me, or something. I forget right what it was.
That's really exactly interesting.
And
because a dream within a dream is usually a dream of the collective, like a collective unconscious dream. Because that's how Jung describes it. He says basically what the unconscious is the conscious dreaming, sleeping, and dreaming of itself. But when the unconscious dreams, when the unconscious sleeps, it dreams a deeper dream, the collective unconscious dream. Sorry, I interrupted you. That's just very interesting. When did you dream that?
That was probably, I did another podcast and I talked about it, but it was on a different podcast. Man, that was probably like 2 weeks ago or something. But I remember when I was in a hotel room with someone, and when they came in, uh, I woke up in the dream, and I remember saying, "Hey, man, if these affirmations are a bother, I'll turn them off." And in that dream, I went to go turn them off, but I couldn't because they were actually playing in reality, right? So I was like, "What?" So I thought that was really cool.
Very interesting.
Right?
That one's worth digging into.
You think?
Oh, for sure.
Mm. Okay. One more dream question. This is more of a general dream question. I've always thought, and I didn't know we were going to talk about this, but since you mentioned, like, holy shit, let's talk about dreams for a second. Um, I've always thought, not always, but for the longest time, I've thought that, like, if someone has, for instance, if someone comes off of cannabis, right? They've been doing it for a while, and they take a decent break. You may have experienced this at some point. A lot of times people report having a shit ton more dreams. They're more vivid and super detailed. But some people, they're like terror, nightmares, etc. And other people, it's whatever. It's playful. It's whatever it is, right? My perspective is that when it's terror, when it's nightmares, etc., then that's just a sign of a really deep level of discontent, byproduct of emotional, trauma when they're younger or whatever, right? That's my perspective. But you tell me, am I onto something?
It always depends what someone is holding on to. I mean, the person who stops weed and immediately starts having night terrors has been running from feeling a type of way. They've been suppressing a personal terror, personal feelings
Yeah.
that are going to come back at them. And we try to bury things and ignore things and repress things, but they never truly go away.
Yeah. Right. And so the best thing to do is to go within, right? And Carl Jung's quote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." I've always taken that. It's kind of like if you run into someone that you hadn't seen in 20 years and you ask them, "How's it going, man?" And they're like, "Oh, no, things pretty good, man. We ended up going over here and, went to school, worked there for a little while. We ended up over here, but things are good, man." Like, that's an example of calling it fate. That's an example of someone not actually living their life. What do you think?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think there are so many examples. I think, like by fate, when Jung said that, he meant something edible. He meant he was referring to the story about Oedipus, where he finds out that he's going to sleep with his mother and kill his father, and then ends up running away. And by running away, runs into that very fate. And the idea is that we already, as beings, as adults, if you will, as just, for those of us in our growing up and in our 20s and 30s and 40s, like we're programmed already from our youth, our childhood, and our adolescent. So in not interfering with who we are, with what we are and what we have buried
Mm-hmm.
from our formative years, we allow that programming to take control.
Mm-hmm.
And we more often than not end up becoming somewhat updated versions of our parents at the end of the day,
Mm-hmm.
when we're unconscious like that. So that's the kind of fate, that fate of growing up and turning into your father and
Mm-hmm.
taking his place and marrying a woman who's like your mother, or vice versa. Jung called it the female component of this,
Mm-hmm.
the Electra complex.
Yeah. So breaking free from that, rewiring the mind,
Mm-hmm.
um, we it's like we still get the good qualities, because I feel that there are good qualities in anyone, even if
Of
they,
course.
you know. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like if you do the work to rewire your mind, you embrace the good parts, but you
Mm-hmm.
alchemize the shit or whatever. And that's basically what they mean by breaking, what is it, generational trauma, right? Isn't that what it's said a lot?
Mm-hmm. Um, yes, yeah, you're right, and I wouldn't necessarily frame it in a good bad
Mm-hmm.
uh, paradigm or a good bad binary so much as it's um, whether you want to be um, an updated version of someone else or you want to be you, essentially alchemizing in what is you and what isn't, figuring out, yani, what is it that your spirit brought to this earth before it received all of this
Mm-hmm.
societal, parental, familial programming. And but yani, of course that's not to say that our parents don't have good qualities or that we won't end up embodying them anyway. I mean, obviously there are many things about me that I know are reminiscent of my parents. My voice is very similar to my mother's voice, for
Mm-hmm.
example.
Mm-hmm.
And I can never reprogram my voice to not be. She will be, her DNA will be with me no
Mm-hmm.
matter what I do. And that's an even deeper unconscious place than I could probably ever reach without maybe the proper technology or the proper science, right? So that we don't really have yet. So there are things that there is just no escaping. It's really more a matter of bringing out the you in all of this. What is it that you genuinely bring? What is the original contribution of your spirit as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to just being an outgrowth of someone else? And I think no matter what we do, we are breaking generational traumas, especially this generation. Um, like, there's so much to say about the freedoms that I have and that my body has that no woman before me in my bloodline would have ever dreamt of. Maybe my mother
Mm-hmm.
dreamt of it, and my mother waited longer than her foremothers to carry children and to marry and to put her body through all of that.
Mm-hmm.
She was the first, she was the closest thing to what I am now. But today, my body of a 31-year-old woman in my bloodline is very confused because by now even my mother had two children.
Mm-hmm.
My grandmother had four.
Mm-hmm.
Her mother had who knows how many. Like,
Mm-hmm.
um, so in that, and if I do nothing else, I've already broken uh, that generational chain, if you will, that behavior, that habit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you for that. And thank you for being here. If I haven't already said it, I think I did. But
Hmm.
um,
Thanks for
so,
having me.
oh, it's my pleasure. I'm excited. There's so many places that I could go, but I'm going to go to where I sent you a voice note about a ways back, probably a month or two back. It's kind of like a little bit of rant, and that's where I guess the inner child in me wants to go, you know, and so that's what I'm going to do. I think that in the subconscious realm, we have our subconscious view of ourselves and then the subconscious view of the world we live in. And in the subconscious view of the world we live in, there is either a presence or an absence or some varying degree of what we think is going to happen when we leave this planet. And also, like, our own understanding of why things work the way they are on like a spiritual kind of metaphysical plane. And like, if you don't have that map, sure, you can work hard and make money and stuff like that, but I think we're missing a piece of living life fully without something there. But I also believe that it, like, for me, it's something that's changing. So many people, they have this fixed subconscious map of how the world works and they never look at it and try to change it, right? But that being said, there's certain questions in my current subconscious map of how the world works that I would just love to run by you because I think your mind is amazing, and I'd love to see what you think about it. Right. I was listening to Robert Edward Grant. I don't know if you've listened to Robert Edward Grant before or not, but he talks about the Hermetic principles and stuff too. And he was talking about, he said, when I look out in the world, because he's been doing the internal work for a little while, and he said, when I look out in the world and I see that there's still, and this goes into that as within, above, within, without, the whole thing, right? When I look out in the world and I see that there's still turmoil going on in other countries, that is something for me to reflect on. Still, there's still more growth, and I realize that we have the self, but then we also have the full self, conscious and unconscious, both in ourself and the globe, the whole thing, right? So it's collective trauma that has created the shit in our world, right? But then when we look at the ideas of law of attraction, which I used to have super, super massive resistance to, the idea of synchronicities, which has been talked about for a long time and all sorts of different authors, obviously Carl Jung and his book Synchronicity, Deepak Chopra, Robert Edward Grant is someone that when I first heard him talk about it, I was like, all right, this guy seems polished. He's not a nutcase, so maybe there's something to it, And then I started keeping a synchronicity journal, And so I'm seeing the law of attraction begin to work. And I realize now that the most important thing there is your actual subconscious belief in whatever it is that we're talking about. But the idea is that our thoughts have the ability to control physical matter in our world, but also that, right? So there's over 8 billion people that all have their own version of that. So the only way that I can make sense of that is that there's some form of multiverse, different dimensions and shit, right? And I think I've heard Bashar talk about this before. We're always changing timelines. We don't see it, we don't feel it. It's fucking every billionth of a second or whatever. We're always changing. And so the way that I can make sense of this, and if you say no, that's not it, or you don't think, or whatever, like it's all good. I have this opening here in quantum physics. The thing that, as I understand, that puzzles people is they don't understand how it goes from before matter to matter. They understand how it's here and here, but not the in-between part. And that's kind of the whole deal of this existence. If we knew it, then there wouldn't be much of a point in living this life. But I think that the only way it makes sense to me is that I'm gradually shifting dimensions. And so if that's the case, though, that would mean that at a certain point in my inner healing journey, that all of the turmoil in the world, in my version of the world, would end. But then the analytical mind is like, there's no fucking way that that's how this shit works. And so then the only other thought I can think of is that the mechanism of the universe, infinite intelligence or whatever, it works so well that it's able to do law of attraction stuff in particular worlds. But dude, we're all fucking connected. So I don't know. That's where my brain kind of goes. Like, I don't know what to do with this, but I'm still on the right track. I know that, but So I was curious your thoughts.
Those are a lot of ideas.
I know. Really, your idea of piecing together the potentiality of shifting to different dimensions based on your fucking thoughts and your emotions or whatever. Microscopic shifts, but
yeah. So, I don't understand quantum physics or quantum mechanics well enough to say to describe how it might relate to our understanding of spirituality, though I have seen obviously a lot of people talk about it and theorize about it, which isn't really new. In the early 20th century, the era that I studied of occultism and this fanaticism in the occult and in alchemy was also linked to scientific revolution, the Industrial Revolution, the discovery of time as relative, and the discovery of the unconscious. But today, like in my perspective, the idea of the law of attraction and the subconscious belief and how our mind creates our reality, for me, in my understanding, there isn't such a thing as subconscious belief.
Mm-hmm.
because the subconscious is not like the conscious mind. So the subconscious isn't thinking of things and isn't believing things. The subconscious is, the way the Buddhists describe it, is a storehouse, the
Mm-hmm.
storehouse of memory, the
Mm-hmm.
storehouse of consciousness. So everything that comes through the conscious, whether awaredly by the individual or not, ends up being stored in the subconscious. And the more of an emotional attachment you have to a moment and to a memory, the bigger space it'll take up, if you will, the more weight it'll have in the storehouse. So that eventually, while you're living your life, you what you have in that storehouse will inevitably attract whatever is like it or whatever complements it, just in the most basic sort of way. um so يعني مثلا when I'm in my alchemy program, we got rid of the idea of subconscious belief and started to really work with the notion of data, the subconscious being a storehouse and needing data to challenge the data that's already there. So if in my subconscious there is the data that I'm worthless through a series of memories that have proven to me via the emotional response they've gotten out of me, certain memories and moments and being put down and experiences, then the step to our reprogramming is to conduct new experiments or have new experiences that show me that I am not worthless, that I am valuable, that I am loved, that I am important, you know. So to me, it works more like that, more so than a matter of beliefs and just thinking what I want and getting what I want. And I do think that some people, some minds are more powerful than others
Mm-hmm.
based on how trained you are, based on how much mental power and will you have over your mental state.
Mm-hmm.
I think that also uh, determines, you know, what you can and can't bring to yourself, your overall energetic state, your vibration. We all exist at a certain frequency as beings, right? Like right now, if we had the right technology, you could see the aura of my frequency and I could see the aura of your frequency if we had, like, you know, the right kind of glasses or something.
Mm-hmm.
And also, you know, that's going to differ from person to person based on what you eat, based on how often you move, based on your posture, based on your thoughts and your attitude. There's, you know, based on whether or not there's a disease in your body or something. There's so many subtle as opposed to gross or obvious factors.
Mm-hmm.
The subtle factors are, I think, the more powerful, and we miss them a lot of the time. They're always revealing themselves to
Mm-hmm.
us, but we miss them.
Yeah, like always.
Yeah, yeah,
So I see what you the reframe there on the subconscious belief. Um, I think I say it a lot because it makes sense when you
yeah.
first start looking at it. Like, it makes sense, but scientifically, it looks like it's more just about how strong certain neural pathways are, right? So when
Mm-hmm.
you're talking about data, then you're putting in data that's rooted in love, different pathways of thoughts or focal
Yes.
points or whatever that have that love energy. Then now you're installing the software or whatever of
Yeah.
love, which is going to attract things that are in the frequency of that.
Mm-hmm.
But then the like the idea, because a lot of these law of attraction books, they talk about playing the role. of the future version of yourself that you want to be, and then assuming that what it is that you want to desire is going to happen, like like the energy of it's already happened, but it's in the story, it's coming, and then you just fucking forget about it. And so I'm thinking that, the more that you install, neural pathways or whatever, right, in the
Mm-hmm.
direction of I am that person, in your day to day actions, walking into the grocery store like that person, and then also setting the intention that, like, yeah, this is going to happen. Then you just let go of it. And you stay in the present moment and continue to be mindful, but like in the secret, the thing that got me like kind of like, I don't know about this. There was one part where the dude said that he ended up getting the exact house that he had on like a poster, and I'm like, all right, I'm on board with a lot of what you guys are talking about here, but I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think I'm going to manifest an exact house. But manifest itself, I also know the definition of the word is not what a lot of people think it is, right? It's just to produce, right? Essentially.
To
Uh,
unveil.
so yeah.
But it makes sense that that would happen, right? Because if he has a picture of this house on the wall that he
Mm-hmm.
looks at every day and he has an emotional response to the photo,
Mm-hmm.
it's reinforcing the picture in the subconscious. It's a storehouse,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's storing a lot of emotion with this image of a house.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, it will complement itself in his physical world. Like, it does make sense that he would find the thing that he's been looking at and thinking about and has a memory of stored with this positive emotion, this powerful emotion
Yeah.
attached to it.
Yeah. I mean, like, I'm not opposed to it being a potentiality, like that could happen, But the analytical mind's like, I'm on board with the manifestation and law of attraction. I see it happening in my life, but like a specific mansion that sits on the water that there's only one of, and is currently occupied by someone else. Is it possible? Yes, it's possible, right? And it's funny, like I had this guy on my podcast, Matt Cook, when I first started doing this stuff, and I was talking to him about, at that time I was like, so if I want to manifest 2 grand, specifically, that's where I'm kind of disconnecting here. I don't know. He's like, well, that's why it's not working. And I was like, oh, okay. So maybe, but
And I agree. I agree. As much as you allow yourself to take in, sorry, I spilled some coffee on myself.
you're good. We got to see a little more of your shirt, so that's fine.
شو اسمه يعني as much as you allow to be possible
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, it's what you are willing to know. It's what you are willing to store in that subconscious mind as data.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, like if you're hesitant, if you're not sure of the thing, like you're not sure of the knowledge that you're going to be, let's say, a millionaire.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's not going to be stored in your subconscious. If you're waking up every day with the assuredness, especially in that little window as soon as you wake up, before you're totally conscious, you're waking up and you're going, I'm a millionaire. It's so nice to be a millionaire. I feel amazing. It feels so good to be a millionaire. That's going to be stored in there eventually. Subconscious is going to be like, all right, so this is a fact
Yeah.
that we need to take it down. I need headquarters to take down the fact that this woman is a millionaire.
Yeah.
And I need the conscious mind to start working towards getting that $1 million because I can't live in dissonance.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And that I'm with that 100%, because it's the millionaire thing, right? And utilizing the first thing in the morning, sure, but the specific, like this year I'm going to clear $111,000 and
Do it.
On the nose, like
Yes.
not above or below,
You're going to do it.
on the fucking nose. But that's the thing, is like, maybe I feel that there will be a point that I feel that I can do that. Right now, I feel confident that I do what I love. I will always do what I love. And there's never going to be a shortage of money, right? I believe that wholeheartedly, and the money grows from that. But like pinpointing a particular number or a particular house. That's where, you know.
That's better though. They say that having a pinpointed number or thing, the more clear you can be on the vision, the more you can really see specifically what the goal is.
Yeah.
Um, you know, the easier it can be just because you now have a mark to shoot towards. When I first started my TikTok, I used to say to myself, I used to sing to myself that I would have 100,000, 100 new followers a minute for 100,000 minutes. Every time I would post a video, right? That's how I started. Every time I would post a video for the first 2 weeks, every time I would post a video, I would post it and I would sing 100 new followers a minute for 100,000 minutes. And within 2 weeks, um, my account blew up. I went from 8K to 100K within a day, within like 24 hours.
Jeez.
So it was the 100,000.
Yeah.
And sometimes having that number, the specificities specificities are good for any kind of data. I remember when we're letting go of the notion of belief and accepting the notion of knowledge, of data, of storehouse,
Yeah.
then we can recognize, I think, the benefit of specifics, the benefit of specificity, being saying like, yeah, this is a number.
I like
I'm
that.
gonna yeah, it's gonna be there. It's just gonna reinforce, like, Mish
Yeah.
Bus, she's gonna be rich. She's gonna be worth this much.
I like that. Having a target, right, as opposed to being a boat in the water without a target.
And I think it also helps the mind, the conscious mind, start to plan accordingly, just without you even realizing it. Just because because it's there in the subconscious then starts to get to work for you. Like, okay, so there's this gap between where she seems to be and where I know she's supposed to be. So let me get to work on coming up with some ideas and get her to start moving towards this, because I don't want to live in dissonance.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've seen that in the work related to the part of the subconscious mind that's belief in self, and for anybody that might have resistance to the money part or the self part, like when I first started telling myself that I loved myself, I had resistance to it, but I just continued to do it. Right. And yeah, the unfolding of me just automatically doing stuff that was good for me, and I started losing weight. In the past, when I would try to lose weight, I was doing it because I didn't love myself. I was trying to fix myself, right? But then when I shifted to rewiring and creating that relationship, the weight just fucking fell off. I mean, I'm still doing stuff and still growing, in the gym and all that. But yeah, man. And so that's where I reached the space where I was like, all right, well, if this shit works over here, then certainly it's going to work in the category of finances as well, or anything else for that matter. Right? Yeah.
Yeah. We're just using the $1 million as an example. It's really anything you want.
Yeah.
Whatever it is that you're trying to do, or wherever it is that your soul feels called.
Yeah. So before we move on to anything else, I really want to come back to the subconscious map of the world thing. Do you ever think about that in terms of the potentiality of multiverse? Because in order for you to manifest and do all that, then it just makes sense to me that there's more than one version of reality. I know there's a lot of science that kind of like illuminates that a little bit, right? Like, don't they say that there's 11 different dimensions or something? I don't know. But
I think that's the M theory. Is that what it's called?
Maybe, yeah.
I don't know enough about the science, to be honest, to speak on it.
Yeah, yeah.
At least in my perception of the world, it feels like in every moment there are decisions to be made, You're always making a choice, and before you make that choice in that brief little interim period,
Mm-hmm.
all of these paths are opened up, and depending on your decision, there's a certain outcome, a certain direction that you're taking. And before you make the decision, there are these numerous ones, and every moment you pick, you kind of eliminate the possibilities of all of these other infinite paths, and you draw your path,
Mm-hmm.
essentially, whether in tandem, in parallel. All of these outgrowth paths are spreading out into these parallel rhizomic existences where we exist on infinite planes. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe. Yani, it's a to me it's a comforting thought, because it makes me feel like then I'm not missing out on anything. No matter what I choose in what moment, I can I can find comfort in the fact that I'm doing all the other things in all the other lifetimes, in all the parallel existences. But other than that, I don't think about it much,
Yeah.
only because I it doesn't um it doesn't do much for my lived day to day. One conception of the multiverse I had at some point was really just the fact that we are the multiverse. So the parallel life that I haven't lived, you're living it.
Mm-hmm.
Or, someone from my audience, everyone from my audience, every person is living the parallel life that I did not live.
Mm-hmm.
From the worst to the best, from the children in Gaza and the children mining in the Congo to Elon Musk and
So the
all
same
these
the same
billionaires.
soul, the same soul essentially lives all lives, basically.
Yes.
Yeah,
And we all live doing it in parallel.
yeah. Right, right. Yeah, I saw a little cute video that was like an animated video that kind of talked about that. I forget what
The
it's called.
egg.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, yeah. Um, and I like that versus traditional fundamentalism, kind of view or whatever. But like you said, if it is possible that there are infinite numbers of versions of you and your quote unquote higher self is already aware of all potentialities because all potentialities exist and we are just living in this what we're experiencing now, that does kind of take away, if that's like your map, it kind of takes away fear of missing out on anything, you know and I feel like when there's obviously multiple components, but if we have a lack of fear of missing out, I feel like that inevitably makes us embrace life more, you know
Hmm. Yeah. I guess, yeah, because it's easier to be in the moment when you're not worried about,
missing a moment.
yeah, somewhere else with someone else. But then, no, longing and jealousy and love and attachment, all of these things are part also of being human, not being able to be everywhere we want to be at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, always. It's those limitations that make the human experience. If we were so satisfied with every moment, and if everyone was so aware all the time of how we're still we're still living out all of our fantasies and parallel worlds, I don't know, it's a boring life.
Well, yeah, I mean it's kind of the same thing. It's like trauma is a necessary part of life, right? Without trauma, there would be no growth.
Yeah,
Without
well,
varying levels of trauma.
yeah, okay, yeah, you're right, arguable. I mean, I did read recently in these studies about how we say that trauma and suffering are necessary for growth, but are they? Because really, no, a loving environment, and a supportive environment, a safe environment, that's also proven to be very beneficial for children, children who grow up loved and supported and
Sure.
secure, they usually do better than the rest of us. In fact, more often than not, the people who grow up in trauma and suffering who then succeed later on are the exception, not the rule. But we have this understanding of, well, you got to be, a diamond needs to be put under pressure to shine, and all of that, all this,
I mean, I
white
feel like it's
knuckling.
like the tree thing, right? Like the tree grows above the ground and also below the ground simultaneously, right? And I know that it's all perspective, but and then simulation theory, it's like we're in a movie, and what kind of movie would it be if the guy or the girl gets, the person of their dreams and the job and the money and the house and whatever, they have everything out of the gate. I'm not watching that movie, you know.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, no, we want to watch the struggle. About the tree, a tree does not grow in traumatic conditions. A
mm,
tree needs, like all plants, it needs the right conditions to
mhm,
grow healthily. It needs to be watered, it needs sun. You can't keep it in darkness and dry it up and expect it to grow, and then when it doesn't, be like, you were supposed to overcome these challenges,
mhm,
stupid tree.
mhm.
You're a lazy tree. Clearly, you're a lazy tree. Like,
Yeah,
the question would be like, oh my God, why didn't it get sunlight? Why didn't it get watered?
yeah.
As opposed to like, why didn't it overcome the circumstances? But yeah, in terms of story, fiction, the hero, the mythology that's all based on is rooted in our story, the story of humankind emerging essentially from this unconscious, natural, animalistic state of life,
Mhm,
emerging from there and becoming these conscious, intelligent, linguistic beings, right? And that involves struggle, and it involves suffering, and it involves war and famine and disease and survival. Like, we are all only here today because our ancestors survived
mhm.
at some point.
Yeah.
Survived, not thrived.
Mhm,
Like just, all most of, I would say, like my son, anyone who is of European descent, like, your ancestors survived the plague, which
mhm,
was more than the numerous plagues, sorry, which is more than what a lot of people could have said.
mhm,
Lots of people died from just natural things. So that's besides, war and our own propensity for violence against one another.
mhm,
So, yeah, of course, in story, we want to see, I think, that unconscious trauma, the trauma of being, the trauma of the human existence and the human struggle, the human emergence, the emergence of consciousness. We want to see that played out in our fictions. That is the story of the hero. It's the story of the emergence of consciousness.
mhm,
He always ends up being, at the end, this whole new character with this newfound perspective of the world and awareness that he didn't have in the beginning. Whereas in the beginning of the story, when he's called to action, he rejects it and he's afraid and he wants to stay in his little life. It's usually, that's usually the plot
mhm,
uh, of these hero stories. And there's something to be said about that in comparison with like the hero's journey as opposed to the heroine's journey,
mhm,
which I haven't seen yet much talked about. Like, I know Jung and Mary Louise von France wrote a little bit about like the Electra complex, the animus, as these sort of parallels to these mirrored experiences that men and women have. But lately I've been thinking that there is no mirrored experience. That in fact, if men need to be externally initiated by the world, by the adventure, by the tribe, by other men who call him into action, women don't have that privilege. Women don't have the privilege of being called to action and rejecting. the call, because womanhood, and I mean this like in terms of women with uteruses, women who menstruate, um, women, womanhood is just lumped on you. You don't really get to reject when your uterus decides that it's going to shed for the first time. When your body decides, when nature decides that you will be a woman, that's it. You're out of paradise. There's no back and forth. There's no, I don't want this. There's no, let me think about it. There's no talk with my uncle to see if this is the right journey for me. There's just, oh, I'm bleeding profusely between my legs. Am I dying? Like,
Yeah.
what's going on?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's something just like that in itself. That's the heroine's journey.
Mm-hmm.
That's the making of the heroine.
Mm-hmm.
It's choiceless and it's brutal and it's natural.
Mm-hmm.
How did I get here?
Man, we've gone down a lot of roads, but I will say that I would like to just kind of pull it back to the idea of different lives and reincarnation, right?
Right.
Um, you know, if it is possible that, you know, the real deal is, you know, we are the extension of, you know, consciousness, quantum field, whatever. We're our own unique extension of that, and we have a higher self. Reincarnation's a thing. God knows how many lives an individual's had. You know, you talked about certain people have minds that maybe are more strong than others. Perhaps those that have stronger minds are individuals who have lived a shit ton of lives, and they've lived a dozen of lives where they went through some shit, like what the people over there, you know, in Palestine, et cetera, are going through right now.
Yeah.
But then they've also lived lives where, you know, it wasn't so whatever, and then now they're living this existence. And when you look at it from the cosmic scale, that 70, whatever is it, 70, 80 year average lifespan right now is like a blip on the cosmic scale. And if we are connected to consciousness and all this stuff is a thing somehow, then, you know, kind of what you said earlier, bad or good. I mean, it's just framing. You know, is it an experience that you want to have? No, but it's like when you look at it from a spiritual perspective, we didn't choose. Well, you know, some thought is we did choose the life we led, right? But we're fucking here now, and you just got to do what you got to do. And I know you've looked into the Essenes, right? Like you're familiar with the Essenes, I'm assuming to some degree, right? And because you know all that shit. And I'm recently learning about it, but I learned that there was a point when they were asked, "What's your secret?" You know, and these Essenes would not fucking budge, right? Like they were tortured and their tongues were pulled out, as I understand it, and all these things, and they were smiling like, "We're not going to give you the secret. There's nothing you can do to get me to tell you what's inside of me," right? And
Mm.
like, you know what I mean? Like, so it's not that I don't have, you know, this is a part of my unconscious mind. It's not that I don't have, um, you know, compassion for those that go through stuff. I certainly do, but it feels like it's just all part of the thing, you know. And when you look at quantum physics and the connected nature of everything, there's no separation. You know, it's all part of the one thing, you know. So I
You
don't
mean
know.
like the war, like what's happening in Palestine?
Like everything expands. So everything that is expanding positive, you know, in our frame perspective of positive, we're also getting our frame perspective of negative because everything's expanding.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, yes, everything is part of the grander picture, including, you know, what's happening to Palestine, including the aggressor, including Zionism, and more importantly, including the rising consciousness and awareness towards that part of the world and what's happening. That's also part of the picture.
Yeah.
And we get to decide the beauty of it, the magic of our existence is the power to decide, what do I want to be in the picture?
Mm-hmm.
When this moment is solidified for the future to look back and see, where will I be in the picture?
Mm-hmm.
Will I be one of the rising wave that is fighting to stop the injustice against the bodies of my brothers and sisters?
Mm-hmm.
Am I going to be with those who stood by and watched neutrally and empowered the aggressor? Will I be the aggressor? Who will I be, when this moment is frozen in time? We get to choose. We get to choose that. So, yes, it's all part of the picture. Yes, it's all necessary. But your interpretation, your reaction, your response to the real, that's also necessary. That's also part of the picture.
Because we are having a human experience.
Right. We're here with it. And I can choose to lean on the privilege of having a Canadian passport, not being Palestinian, not being religious in any way, not being under fire, living in Canada, being very comfortable. Like, why should I care what's happening in the Middle East? Like, why is that my business? Like, it doesn't have to be. And no, it doesn't. But I know that for me to sit and say, well, this war is just part of existence and I need to accept it as it is to dismiss that also resistance to the war, dissent with the war, dissatisfaction, a massive dissatisfaction across the globe is also a part of this picture and is being suppressed. And my role in the world isn't to accept the lie of the moment, but to actually see the picture. Because if I just sit back and watch, if I didn't know any better, I mean, the Palestinians should be killed. According to the propaganda, they deserve to die. They all deserve to die. Fuck those people. Hamas, fundamentalists, fucking crazy terrorists, blowing themselves up, doing this and that. They hate gay people. Fuck these people. Why should they be on the earth? If I were to take it all at face value, big picture, right? Because this is the grand narrative. They deserve to die. They're not worthy of life in our modern world. That is what it is. Like, that's the great narrative at the top by the media and all the big outlets. But what I'm doing is at the same time ignoring the real pulse of the world. And this is why this goes back to the as above so below, and why it's so dangerous to conceive of this as a reflection, as the above and the below as reflections as opposed to extensions of one another. Because when they're reflections, then the above and the below are not one another. They're not making one another actively and consistently. They just reflect one another. So the tyranny of powers is a reflection of the attitude of peoples. The tyranny of the Zionist government then is equated as a reflection of the tyranny of the hearts of Israeli peoples. The tyranny of Hamas fundamentalists is a reflection of the tyranny of every Palestinian in Gaza, and therefore no one is innocent. But that's not how it works. When everything is making, when the below and the above are in the process of creating one another, always, then we see how they are not reflections. It is not a matter of the brighter it gets, the darker it gets. The higher we go, the lower we can go. That would be a reflective perception. Really, it's the purer our basest material, the purer our highest material. The purer our highest material, then the purer our basest material. The basest, the lowest, the phrase is that the highest is of the lowest and the lowest is of the highest, as in the most base things are what create the highest of things, and the highest of things are what create the basis of things. So when a Zionist says that, Palestinians deserve to die because they are all guilty and they hate gay people, and it's up to us to eliminate Hamas. This, to me, to someone, probably anyone, sounds very base. It sounds very disgusting. Like, what a disgusting thing to say, what a base thing to say. But the person saying this is saying it from a place of nobility. They're saying it from a place of contention that this is how they will achieve safety, that this is the highest of causes. So this most base of sentiments is coming from the highest and most noble of places in this person, not because their height is so high that it makes their low so low, but because this is the material. This is the working real, the dust and dirt of what they're working with. This is what it means to be noble in their paradigm. To eliminate the threat, for example. Yeah. They can't see beyond this. That's the material of their lived experience. And the work then is to learn enough, to have enough of a critical mind to break down what we think is noble and what we perceive to be base and where it comes from, and whether or not we want to keep working with this material or we want to introduce new material and see how that reflects.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's one way of looking at it.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. And it's expanding my perspective. You know, I'm reflecting on, you know, how is there something that I can do or I should do, right? And in my mind, the way it's set up now is I think to myself, like if someone, for instance, if I'm working with someone and they're watching a lot of the news, one of the first things I'm like, hey man, turn that shit off. Because people that come to me, they're not in a good space, right? So I'm like, yeah, you gotta fucking take a break from that shit. You know what I mean? Like, and obviously excessive content, all that stuff, right? Yeah. We got to focus. In order for you to change your life, we got to focus on what's in you first. You know, like you running around doing whatever, you're not doing shit anyway. You're just getting stressed out, and you know what I mean? Like you're eating food and you're staying up, like shitty food and staying up late, and like not you. I'm saying someone who is stressed out about the shit, right? I know
that is me. That is me.
But you're not. Okay, so you have a little bit of stress here, obviously, because it is close to home, right? But you know, you managing this versus a version of yourself who never did any internal introspection, you know, two different examples, right? So, but the people that come to me, and also where I started was like, I used to watch a shit ton of news, you know, like, and I was always in a state of stress and shit, you know, and trying to figure out what's going on, always freaking out about what's going on, all that stuff. And my shit was deep, right? Like I didn't start doing my introspection until I was like 39, you know, and I'm still doing it, you know. But what I found in my journey is that like, it appears to me that this is a ripple effect, right? Me doing my internal work allowed me to begin to help others to do theirs, which then has a ripple effect. Even if someone works at a grocery store, for instance, you never know who they're going to be in a better mood for that day, that it could have had a positive effect. And that's how I envision myself contributing to helping the world. I then will ask someone, like, if it goes further, yeah, I know, but what about this? What about that? My question right then is, all right, I hear you. What are you doing about it? What are you doing about it? I know you're doing some shit about it, right? Like you have a fucking platform. You have a massive platform, you know, that makes sense. But an individual who is not a content creator, who is just stressing all the fucking time, when I ask them, like, hey, all the love, what are you going to do about it? You know, well, you know, they're fucking blah, 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 right? I'm like, all right, listen, I hear you, but let's take a break. Let's take 30 days off. Let's work on this stuff. And maybe we can slowly reintroduce reading the news as opposed to watching the news. And who knows, maybe you'll end up doing something about it, right? But like, and this is me, my own internal unconscious seeking validation in the moment. I feel that my contribution to the world is what I'm doing now. And I feel so thankful to be able to do what I do now. I think that having, for instance, you know, having you on this podcast, the universe aligned in a certain way. I did not think we were going to go down this road today, but we did. right? And so this is in contribution towards spreading awareness, right? But
Mm-hmm.
perhaps there's a certain point in my journey where my voice becomes something. It is something, but when it becomes, something bigger or whatever, maybe something will shift. Maybe I'll start doing some stuff. I don't know. But
Mm-hmm.
I know that from my perspective, if we were to call something broken, and I'm sure you would agree, it's the systems that govern everything. And that's what's fucking broken. And I also feel that, I'm assuming you might agree as well with TikTok and the fact that, and again, I spend no time looking at this shit, but I understand that both the left and the right are in opposition to TikTok. And so it's like, well, hey, man, then something's wrong here because you guys are always fighting. So this means this is fucking y'all's game up, is what it is. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And so, but the depth of what we have, what we are experiencing here in our timeline, is deep. And Ray Dalio talks about the 6 cycles. I think it's the 6 cycles of any civilization. And his prediction, we're at 5.5. What's going to happen? I don't fucking know. But I know that the more that I go down my uh, introspective journey, the more well equipped I am to navigate life and help others navigate their lives. And I feel like that's what I should focus on right now. So that's my inner child being like, well, just so you know, I fucking, like that's all that is.
Yeah, no, I feel you. Um, I mean, we do have an opportunity right now, a really beautiful opportunity to do a lot of collective work. And I think we're doing it. I think a lot of people are doing it. Um, Besides, I've said this before, Jerusalem being a really deep unconscious seat of our spiritual life as a collective, whether we're religious or not, whether we subscribe to any of the 3 Abrahamic religions or not, Jerusalem remains a holy center in our collective memory. And the physical Jerusalem is under attack. The physical Jerusalem is split in half.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, we're going to be in unrest personally and collectively. But what I appreciate about what's going on is the the collective work and the collective rise to the occasion, um, because we are learning about ourselves now through Palestine. We're learning about ourselves as modern Western citizens of a state. We're learning what our shadow as a collective is, what it's costing for us to live in the comfort that we have, what it's costing the earth and the people of the earth, indigenous populations worldwide, not just in Palestine. The the exposure to this brutality is really giving us a taste of this is what your modernity really rests on. This violence is what affords you 24/7 heating in Canada. It's why you can live in a frozen tundra of a place year round and watch your TV and feel comfortable and come and go. It's because indigenous populations and the earth are being exploited worldwide. Um, and I think it's giving us a great push to do work as a collective. So, and younger people, younger students, and the Gen Z uh, group, the generation, they're spearheading this shift in consciousness. They are tomorrow. They're the leaders of tomorrow, and they are the signs of a changing consciousness. The realization that we have afforded celebrities idol worship when they never did anything to deserve it, for example. This is great, a great awakening in itself. you know, and there's so many little things that young people are doing like that through TikTok and through other platforms that are just so beautiful and so important. And I think, like, for me, when I work with a lot of people, especially right now, who are feeling unrest as well. And what I like to do is focus in on um, one thing, one image, one video, and really try and walk with the person towards what this means for them, how they might integrate this new awareness into themselves. I think we talked about this before, but like for the person who is particularly affected by children, the children being hurt, the children that are being maimed and killed and buried alive in this, the utter brutality with which children, just small children, are being approached through this. Forget everything else. In that, I would implore you to speak to your inner child. See where is it that you have brutalized the child in your heart, the child in yourself, because this usually what we're drawn to, what we have the most emotional reactions to, that is what's most useful for us. Different people will be moved by different things and different aspects of the same thing, and using what moves you to understand yourself is, I think, the best way to go about it. And I mean, it's also important to remember that so many people like yourself are being opened up to this as an adult, and that's very, very difficult. Like, I've always been aware of this. I had my first confrontation with the fact that there was something wrong at the same time that I had my spiritual experience. I was about 6 or 7 years old. And I told my teacher in a geography class there was a map, and I told him the map was wrong because it said Israel, and I had a map at home that said Palestine. And so I just like looked at the map. I was like, "Oh, sir, the map is wrong." And he's like, "No, it's not." And I was like, "Yes, it is. It's supposed to say Palestine. And it says Israel." And he was like, "There's no such thing as Palestine. That's Israel." And I was like, "No, actually, I have a map at home and it says Palestine. You've never heard of it?" And he was like, "Get out." And I was like, "What?" So 6 or 7 years old, and
Yeah,
I'm
that's an imprint. That's an imprint.
Right. And then you go home and you grow up in an um in an immigrant household from the Middle East, and you hear Palestine, Palestine, you hear Israel, you hear Hezbollah, you hear Hamas, you hear Sabra Shatila, you hear these things growing up. They're just part of the background of your existence, and you live in a place where death is imminent and brutal death is possible. It's not a distant dream of a thing, you know. Death by bombing is a distant nightmare to anyone living in the United States.
Yeah.
You know, no one is imagining bombs falling on Miami or LA unless it's in pure and utter dystopic fiction, nothing else.
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, this is our lived experience. Who knows when a bomb could fall on Beirut? And we have a little bit, you know, you're living in the city, you have a little bit unrest, and your parents are calling you from the village, like, please come stay in the village, which is what, like 20, 30, 40 kilometers from the city. And they'll come stay in the village in case they bomb the city. This is Rawa, and this is a lived experience. So when you haven't lived that experience and you're suddenly being exposed to that as a lived experience by people who even remotely remind you of yourself, who even remotely speak your language, that's so scary. Because when it's the Congo, when it's Sudan, when it's our African brothers and sisters who haven't emigrated to America, who don't speak English, who don't look like us, who are too dark for us to care, too in the shadow for us to care. It doesn't break our heart in the same way. You know, we've been seeing brown bodies and the bodies of brown children being brutalized our entire lives. That's not new to anybody, right? There isn't a Western person in the world that doesn't think that all of Africa is just starving, right? So many people in America think that Africa is just one big lump of a place where everybody's poor and hungry.
It's not. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, right. So the understanding that the brown body is brutalized is like is just accepted by so many in the West.
Mm-hmm.
And Palestine is like this weird in between what's happening, because Israelis even look so much like Palestinians. Like there isn't, I know there's a huge conversation online. Everybody's arguing about indigenous and they're not indigenous and ما بعرف شو. But it is true that a lot of Jewish people around the world have Levantine qualities, especially if they come from a line of people who have consistently married within the faith, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, in Lebanon, when I'm on a dating app, uh, I get a lot of Israeli guys on hey, that's suggested to me, and I have to scroll through and see the flag and see them in their uniforms or see the writing in Hebrew to know that they're not Lebanese, because there isn't, you know, most people, you know, we all kind of look the same. They're not, you know, of course there are whiter types of people and there are more appropriative types of Israelis, but generally what we're looking at is so dystopic because the oppressor and the oppressed, to some degree, I think,
Mm-hmm.
are so similar,
Mm-hmm.
and they look so much the same, and they're so close culturally, they're so close traditionally, they're so close religiously. There's already this unconscious understanding of the brotherhood between the Muslim and the Jew, the descendants of Ishmael and Isaac, the brother sons of Abraham, who is legitimate and who is not. And it's so charged and interesting and disgusting and vile and
Mm-hmm.
scary and heart opening to be an adult in America, seeing this now, learning this now, learning how to have a heart, a space in your heart for the other outside our borders,
Mm-hmm.
is new and painful and powerful, but worth sitting in, worth allowing to expand you, so that hopefully, tomorrow, if today you can find space for Palestine, tomorrow you can find space for Congo and for all the browner, brutalized bodies across the earth.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I love it. I agree. I think that it's. I mean, I love your explanation of it. Obviously, not the thing you're talking about, but it's just, you know, most of this is just me listening to you. Like, damn, she's smart. Um, but the thing that I want to kind of bring us to a fold. I would talk to you for like a whole another hour. But so something that stuck out in the beginning of that for me is the connection, right? Like, and you're right. Anybody that's obviously in the West, you know, and they never grew up around that kind of stuff, and then they're exposed to it. It's completely different. You know, definitely challenging to take in, but completely different than what it is over there when you're actually around it, when you're actually in it. Obviously, but like two examples here that I'm looking at, me and you. So your trauma when you were growing up was heavy, right? Like, I mean, it was, that's some deep shit at six, twofold and two big two folds, you know, like that's big shit. Right. And so you were exposed to it firsthand. And from my perspective, it, you know, it comes through when you were talking about it, like your passion for the sharing of this message is palpable, right? Like, because, you know, it comes from a deep place, you know, and that also, obviously is what catapulted you into your own introspective journey, right? As well. So, holy shit, no wonder we have birthed such a fucking divine expression of the divine feminine, you, here with us today. That's my perspective of it, right?
Thank you.
Now, for me, my trauma was a narcissistic sociopath of a father, right? And he was a
Mm.
doctor. Okay. So I grew up where, it wasn't like we were fucking super rich, but we got to take vacations. I got to get new clothes for the new school year. We always had food on the table. I got a car when I turned 16, etc. You know, but the connection between me and him, totally different. And the dynamic of that house, and I didn't fucking realize that this was something that really was causing constriction in my life until I was like fucking 36, 37, 38. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Like, that's a lot of deep neural pathways that have just been
Yeah.
fucking chilling. And so for me, having realized the benefit of alchemizing and doing that work to change that relationship, that's what drives me. It's just so fucking powerful, and so that's what I focus on. But there are
Mm.
plenty of people like yourself who have we all have our own flavor of trauma, if you will, and that's what drives us to do what we do.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. And I mean, as a collective, even, I think Americans and their relationship to violence and to trauma is individualized in that way. So, you're not afraid of bombs falling, but you are weary of school shootings,
Mm-hmm.
for example.
Mm-hmm.
We're not in North America, we're not worried of consistently being invaded by someone or the deep state being more powerful than the national army, but we also are worried that our parents will kick us out at 16 or 18. That they're also worried about being homeless. We're also worried about different things and more individualized experience with these violences and traumas. Not to say that living our we also, in our own way, in the Middle East, we do inherit as well, in the same way, the violence of the system, in the same way that the violence of the Western system has infiltrated your family and your relationship with your father, and the way it trickles down into his use of his power over you. This happens, Yani, in the Middle East. Yani, and I had very spiritual parents. My mother was a dream reader and all of this. But no, I was also, masalan, abused physically, and it wasn't even considered abuse. I don't even now consider it abuse, almost, like it was an understanding that, like, if you spoke Arabic, if you spoke English in our house, you would get smacked across the face. This is just an understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Yani, these are the rules.
Yeah.
Yani, you
Yeah.
don't speak English in my house. Speak English in my house and get smacked.
Yeah.
Just how it is. Get less than an A on a report card, get smacked. Just is what
Yeah.
it is. And it's
Yeah.
a norm. It was a norm, especially, the older generations. And now our generation is learning to communicate, is learning to move past the because I said so,
Mm-hmm.
the do what I say, not what I do
Yeah.
logic.
Yeah.
This whole toxic mindset, because also, like, it's so complicated. Like, we could talk for an hour, but masalan, the effect of the boomers and the Western, I mean, like, the Western rise of boomer culture spread across the globe. So our parents, my parents, the parents of immigrants, the parents that are immigrants, that were immigrants, say during the 80s and 70s and 90s, they also had their own idolized version of the American dream and boomer culture, because they also bought into all of that. They bought into wanting nice cars and wanting nice things and wanting to make millions of dollars and capitalism. And my parents, like so many other immigrants across the world, they left their home to come out here for the dream, for the opportunity, for the money, for all the things.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time lived with the conflict within themselves of wanting to also maintain their traditions. maintain their culture. So yeah, we all have our journeys. We all have our battles and our things, and it's cool that we're all converging right now. Like we're all meeting at this point where we're like, oh, we're actually like so similar. It
Right.
feels like we're all so different, but
Yeah.
we thought we were because that's what they told us. But in reality, we are all under the boot. We have all suffered under the boot. It
Some
has reached us in one way or another. Yeah, in
form.
all these different forms.
Yeah. Unless sometimes I'll say like, unless you maybe were, maybe you were born somewhere in America where both your parents were hippie as shit and they were aware about all these good principles. Right. And maybe that's different, but
I do know people whose parents were hippies, but like they were such users that they could also be abusive. Like it's just unconscious. It's not on purpose, like I always knew growing up like that my parents loved me. There was never like a question of do they love me or not, or oh my gosh, my mom just smacked me, so she must not love me. Like obviously she loves me. She's just fucking nuts. Like that's the so
well, I think that's a fucking great note to wrap this one up. Holy shit. Thank you so much for coming on again.
Thank you.
Are you cool to hang out for 2 more seconds after we pause this? Okay. And then as far as if someone wants to reach out for any of your services, where do they find you?
Yeah, everything is on my website, twitchy-witch.com.
There it is. And I'll put that in the description here too. So, wow. And right when I looked at the thing there, it was 13131. Synchronicity. But anyhow, thank you again. And thank everybody else for hanging out here. This one was a little bit longer, but I'm so excited that I had my first longer episode. This is good. And I envision probably doing more like that at some point. Hopefully another one. Combo. Hopefully another one with Elianne. All right. For everybody else, thanks for hanging out. And until next time. Just you white in me again. Just you white. You'll be sorry that your tears will be too light. Just you white in me again. Just you white.